In 2011's Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, SAS Captain Price and his squad are on the hunt for a chemical weapons smuggler named Warabe, a man who may know the location of their primary target, Makarov. The squad breaches the room Warabe is hiding in, guns down all of his accomplices, and shoots him in the leg. Price then kicks Warabe to the ground and, before even asking him a question, throws down one of the smuggled chemical weapons. Toxic green gas fills the room, Price and the player put on gas masks, and only then does the questioning start. "Where's Makarov?" Price asks, dangling a gas mask in front of Warabe's struggling fingers. Warabe, terrified, yells that he never met Makarov, only a secondary target named Volk. Soap, another member of the squad, puts his boot on Warabe's injured leg and presses down. Warabe screams, gas still filling the room. "Paris," he gasps. Volk oversaw a chemical weapons delivery in Paris. This information is the best the squad could have hoped for. Price nods, tosses Warabe a gas mask, and lets him struggle with it for almost 5 seconds before shooting him in the head. In 2023's Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, SAS Sergeant Kyle Garrick, nicknamed Gaz, is chasing down a man named Andrei Nolan, a member of an ultra-nationalist Russian terrorist group. Gaz puts a couple bullets in Nolan's body armor, but Nolan laughs and says, "Kill me, I won't help you." Gaz knocks out Nolan with a punch and extracts him from the mission. Afterwards, Gaz mentions that Nolan is less conversational than he was, and for almost 5 seconds, the graphics on screen show us a blown-out photograph of Nolan slumped in a chair, his eyes covered and face bloodied. Despite Nolan apparently not giving out any information, the squad's mission continues unimpeded. They got the information they needed from Nolan's confiscated phone. Nolan is never seen or mentioned again. These two examples represent just a fraction of the Call of Duty franchise's nearly 2-decade obsession with torture. Over the course of 20 mainline titles, the Call of Duty games have featured 46 discrete instances of torture. From 1942 to 2065, World War II to the far future, torture is a more consistent presence in the series than characters, gameplay mechanics, or hardware generations. There are only 2 titles in the entire franchise, Call of Duty 1 and Call of Duty Black Ops 4, which don't have a sniff of torture in their campaigns. Black Ops 4, as a matter of fact, doesn't have a campaign at all. Black Ops 4 does have an entry in the series' ongoing zombie mode, which has a separate, interconnected lore, including 6 additional torture scenes, but I've decided not to include zombies in this analysis. The storylines and methods of storytelling are very distinct from the typical single-player campaigns, and also I'm just one man, and I'm very tired. When I started this endeavor, I had some specific instances in mind. The waterboarding sequence in 2019's Modern Warfare, the Russian roulette or glass and mouth scenes from Black Ops 1, maybe even some of the weird future stuff the series has backpedaled from. But I never expected the frequency and the casualness of torture's usage in the series. The task quickly started to feel Sisyphean. I would briefly think I'd found every torture scene, only to uncover another passing mention in a mission briefing, or implication in the set dressing of a level, or 6 in the zombies campaign. I'm not doing zombies. I thought I was done with the search when I started writing this script, and since then I've had to update everything an additional 3 times as I found even more new scenes. Inevitably, one of you will point out that I've missed something, and inevitably you'll be right. Let alone the absence of Call of Duty Black Ops 6, which comes out later this year and will quite likely outdate this whole list. But what searching out dozens and dozens of torture scenes has taught me is that my previous assumed framework for torture was naively narrow, that these games invoke torture so wantonly that it ceases to even stand out from the unending barrage of bullets, explosions, and spinning military emblems. So to keep track of everything, I started a spreadsheet, because this can't be a bout of madness if I have a spreadsheet, right? Ordered chronologically by game, we've got a brief description of the scene and then a number of categories. Who's doing the torturing? Who's being tortured? Is the torture effective? Meaning, does the torturer successfully get information out of the subject? And as the spreadsheet grew by hundreds of cells at a time, I started to see things in the data. Patterns, trends, numbers. Across 20 different games, there emerged something like a philosophy of torture, one that has consumed my waking thoughts for months. Now, I'm going to try and explain what it is. But what's been strange about making this spreadsheet, other than the fact that I've been staring at hundreds of cells labeled Call of Duty torture spreadsheet for a month, is that extended brutal set-piece torture sequences sit alongside bits of the game so quick and unremarked on that many players might not even register them. For instance, let's talk about literally the first 5 minutes of Call of Duty 2, years before the series made a name for itself with morally queasy, controversy-garnering talking points. In Call of Duty 2, we start as Private Koslov in the Soviet Army. We learn how to shoot a gun, how to use our compass, and then walk into a room where Corporal Sergei Merkulov is beating the snot out of a German POW tied to a chair. The German begs the corporal not to kill him, then provides a pile of tactical information that the German army is moving to the southeast and is supported by half-tracks and mobile artillery. Seconds later, another soldier bursts through the door and tells us a German attack is forming to the southeast, instantly confirming the information we just heard from the bound prisoner. Is this a torture scene? Well, not if you take the word of Mr. Spectre, a YouTube channel that uploaded a video called Every Torture Scene in Call of Duty. 2 million views, by the way. But it definitionally is torture. UN definition: severe pain or suffering, mental or physical, inflicted on a person for such purposes as obtaining information, a confession, or punishment for an act that person has or is suspected to have committed. Maybe Mr. Spectre just missed it. I know firsthand how impossible it is to find everything, but I also suspect that simple interrogation roughhousing might be an unclear line for players when considering what constitutes torture. Let me just rapid fire a couple at you to get a gut check reaction. In Call of Duty Vanguard, Nazi officer Richter puts out a cigarette on Lieutenant Kingsley's neck while questioning him. In the same game, the same officer smashes Lieutenant Petrova's face into a table while questioning her. In Call of Duty Advanced Warfare, one of the protagonists and Tier 1 operator, Alona, smashes Dr. Danois' face into a table while questioning him. In Call of Duty Black Ops 3, Commander Hendricks lifts Dr. Salim and pushes him against a wall while questioning him. In Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War, CIA agent Belikov can threaten prisoner Ivanov's family in a ploy for his cooperation. In Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, the second one, Sergeant Soap McTavish threatens to leave General Shepard to freeze to death in Siberia if he doesn't confess in front of Congress. These are all torture via the definition established by the UN and repeated by the US Department of Justice. But some of them, threats that the audience knows are empty, pushing a guy around an interrogation room, don't feel nearly as much like torture as, say, hooking a guy up to a car battery. Torture has so wormed its way into how we think about criminal justice writ large that it often just seems like a matter of process. In a 2019 paper entitled, "Wait, there's torture in Zootopia?" examining the prevalence of torture in popular movies, researchers Delahante and Kearns coded each occurrence of torture in the top-grossing movies between 2008 and 2017, and found that the majority of popular films, including ones made for children, contain at least one instance of torture. In Zootopia, it happens twice, for the record, both at the behest of a Godfather-esque mole named Mr. Big. An analysis of Call of Duty's torture scenes that only included the big ones, the poison gas, the glass in mouth, the ones included in Mr. Spectre's video basically, would be excluding vital data about what the franchise is doing with torture, tracking when and how torture is used casually as much as when it's used bombastically, is what will help us build a framework for understanding its place in the series. A second-long threat to Ivanov's family is just as important to our understanding as a waterboarding sequence that feels like it takes hours. So, finally, let's get to the data. In my research, I've found 46 separate instances of torture in the Call of Duty series. It may surprise you to learn that the split between torture performed by good and bad guys is fairly even. Good guys perform the torture in 52% of cases, bad guys in 48%. This number is actually even closer than it appears given the presence of a couple edge cases, both Salazar in Black Ops 2 and Graves in Modern Warfare 2, the second one, are in fact double agents. They conduct torture with the cooperation of the good guys, but they are, in fact, bad guys. You might assume that the good-bad alignment of the people tortured would be the exact opposite chart. That is, good guys only torture bad guys only torture good guys. This is almost true, but not entirely. On a couple different occasions, good guys torture other good guys. The explicit plot of both Black Ops 1 and Cold War is that the protagonist needs to be tortured in order to remember repressed memories. On one occasion, one antagonist, Hadir in 2019's Modern Warfare, tortures the family of Barkov, another antagonist. In many categories of my analysis, there were edge cases like this, but there's one statistic of who tortures and who gets tortured that I find the most striking. In 46 separate instances of torture, there is only one time in the entire series in which the person being tortured simply does not have the information the torturer wants. Once, when a character named the Butcher demands information from someone in an embassy. Every other time, whether good or bad, pro or antagonist, the characters of Call of Duty are perfectly able to select the exact right person to subject to torture. Torture's most famous hypothetical question is referred to as the ticking bomb or ticking time bomb scenario. It goes like this. Suppose, if you will, that some terrorist has hidden a bomb somewhere inside a major and densely populated city. This bomb, which will claim countless lives if it explodes, is on a timer that is ticking its way towards zero. Fortunately, you have apprehended the very terrorist who hid the bomb and are holding him in captivity. Would you torture this man to find the bomb and avert the explosion? As Alex Adams writes in his book How to Justify Torture,
it might be framed as a question, but the conclusion that framers of the ticking time bomb scenario want respondents to reach is never really open or in doubt. It is designed, like other rhetorical thought experiments, to guide us to a predetermined conclusion. In this case, we are supposed to admit that, although torture is normally wrong and should never be done as a matter of routine, the ticking time bomb emergency provides us with a special exception, a one-of-a-kind situation in which torture might actually be good, might actually help.
One of the things this hypothetical treats as a given is the perfect information we have on the perpetrator. There is no doubt that the person being held in captivity is the person who planted the bomb, and therefore has absolute knowledge of its whereabouts. This is always the situation Call of Duty presents. The unquestionable guilt of the person comes before the ethical question of the treatment they deserve. Sometimes scenes strain to make this true. In the first situation I described, the toxic gas torture in Modern Warfare 3, Price demands the location of Makarov, a piece of information Warabe genuinely does not have. Soap presses forward. Okay, maybe not Makarov, but what about this other guy? Who is he? Where is he? Inevitably, Warabe produces something of value. How would the scene differ if Warabe didn't know the whereabouts of the other guy either? Would the moral righteousness of Price and Soap wobble if these techniques were leveraged against someone who was incapable of giving them what they wanted? Maybe, maybe not. We already knew Warabe was guilty. When Price executes him, the game never wonders if he deserved it. To state the blindingly obvious, this assuredness in the guilt of a captive is not nearly so common in real life. A huge number of the detainees at Guantanamo, for instance, were not caught in the act, as in Call of Duty, but sold to the US for massive bounties from unreliable sellers. In 2006, the US government's own documents revealed that 55% of Guantanamo detainees were not determined to have committed any hostile acts against the United States or its coalition allies, and only 8% were characterized as Al-Qaeda fighters. But maybe are they guilty is a distraction from the time bomb question. Michael Sandel points this out in his book, Justice, What's the Right Thing to Do? Although the time bomb scenario is theoretically designed to demonstrate a practical utilitarian benefit of torture, it includes an inherent appeal to our sense of punitive justice as well.
The moral force of the case for torturing the time bomb terrorist depends heavily on the assumption that he is in some way responsible for creating the danger that we now seek to avert. The moral intuitions at work in the ticking time bomb case are not only about costs and benefits, but also about the non-utilitarian idea that terrorists are bad people who deserve to be punished.
What if, Sandel writes, the hypothetical didn't ask us to torture the guilty party? What if instead we had to torture an innocent third party to find the location of the bomb? Say, the terrorist's child, who has no knowledge or involvement in his activities. In 2019's Call of Duty Modern Warfare, the protagonist tortures a terrorist's child, who has no knowledge or involvement in his activities. One of the most difficult aspects of the franchise's torture scenes for me to categorize was the question of whether the torture scene was primarily inquisitive or punitive. That is, did the torturer mainly want to answer a question or just cause the recipient pain? Some of these are easy to answer. In Call of Duty Advanced Warfare, a ghoulish digi-double of Kevin Spacey shoots Major Cormac in the hip and breaks Sergeant Mitchell's arm without asking them a single question. In Black Ops 2, Raul Menendez kneecaps and slowly kills Agent Hudson as a punishment to the other characters present in the scene.
Your life will be consumed by absolute loss.
Both of these are undoubtedly punitive. In Black Ops Cold War, Special Officer Adler, who is nominally an ally, tortures the protagonist as a method of unlocking repressed memories and stopping a nuclear strike. This is undoubtedly inquisitive torture. Adler has no other motivation to cause the protagonist pain. But what about that Modern Warfare scene? Price and Gaz have apprehended a man named the Butcher, a terrorist who is responsible for countless crimes, including a previously mentioned torture scene. The squad is looking for a chemical weapon and the target of an upcoming attack, a pretty typical ticking time bomb scenario. But despite being repeatedly beaten, Butcher refuses to tell them anything. Then, Gaz goes out to a van, retrieves Butcher's wife and son, returns to the interrogation room, and threatens them with a loaded revolver. Finally, Butcher spills, gives both the location of the weapon and the name of the target. If this is purely inquisitive, then you could frame it as the ultimate expression of the practicality of utilitarian torture. Sure, unlike the classic ticking time bomb scenario, Gaz tortured 3 people instead of 1, and 2 of those people were fully innocent, but hey, 3 people is probably fewer than would have been harmed by a chemical weapon attack. Perhaps Call of Duty is looking Sandel in the face and staking a claim. Yes, torturing an innocent is morally justifiable in these circumstances if it results in saving more lives. But the scene then allows the player to execute Butcher after his confession, extrajudicially murder him in front of his family. And if you choose to do this, the purpose of the whole scene changes shape. This is no longer a utilitarian exercise in causing the least suffering. In fact, it seems like the inverse. The prior scene is recontextualized as an elaborate punishment, its moral calculus deciding that torturing Butcher is in fact more important than not torturing the civilians sitting next to him. We know that the game does, in fact, find this punishment morally acceptable, because there's a different line in the scene that you can't cross. Pull the trigger on Butcher's wife or son, and the game will cut to black, informing you that killing innocent civilians will not be tolerated. All the rest of this, though, tolerated with gusto. So you see why it can be challenging to categorize the motivating factors behind all of the game's torture scenes. Inquisitive torture, punitive torture, they quite literally bleed into each other. Trend-wise, the series does feature bad guys torturing for purely punitive reasons at a far higher rate. But if I decided to categorize every time the good guys execute their targets after torturing them as primarily punitive, because execution is, of course, not remotely inquisitive, the graphs get significantly closer. If we want to see some unambiguously different graphs, though, we don't have to look farther than torture's efficacy in the franchise. It may not seem that way at first. When viewing all 46 of the series' instances of torture, the efficacy is almost exactly even once again, with just a little wiggle room from situations in which the player is given a choice to either confess or not. But separate that graph into when torture is performed by the good guys versus bad guys, and suddenly the disparities are obvious. Bad guys, as told by Call of Duty, are absolutely terrible at gaining information with torture. There are only 2 instances in the entire series, with the exception of those player choice scenes, in which villains manage to successfully torture info out of anyone. Meanwhile, the good guys, the protagonists and their allies, have a stunning 71% success rate when it comes to torture. A couple smacks, a vial of toxic gas, or a dangle over the side of a building, and their enemies crack like eggs, spilling anything and everything they know. It's possible to read this a couple ways. The first is that the good guys are simply better at torturing. This would match their superior effectiveness at most everything else in the series. Much as the good guys are better at aiming a gun or chasing a terrorist, they're better at knowing what combination of fists, electricity, and threats to leverage in order to get information. But often, the techniques used by good guys and bad guys are exactly the same. A Nazi officer slams a lieutenant's head into a table, a CIA officer smashes a detainee's head into a table. Soviet baddie Kravchenko stabs a US secret agent, US secret agents stab Kravchenko right back. And in these match scenarios, the bad guys talk while the good guys stay silent. Therefore, I think focusing on technique is missing the overall philosophy of the Call of Duty moral universe. What matters is not how the good guys or bad guys act, what matters is the simple fact that they are either good or bad. Their name in the subtitles is written in either green or red text, and being good comes with a strength of character, a moral righteousness that allows them to resist any torture. This falls in line with Call of Duty's valorization of the troops as almost literally superhuman, able to both make decisions and withstand torture that would debilitate an ordinary civilian. In a case of the exception proving the rule, one of the only 2 times that bad guys managed to get information out of torture was when Hadir tortured Barkov's family in 2019's Modern Warfare, a situation in which the subjects of the torture were both civilians and somewhat connected to villainy. As an aside, the other exception was poor Ajax getting information tortured out of him in Call of Duty Ghosts. I don't have an explanation for that one. He wasn't morally compromised, he just seems to have drawn the short end of the stick, the only good troop in the whole damn series who's susceptible to a bad guy's torture. Sorry, dude. When bad guys crack, then, it's indicative of their relative weakness of spirit. The good guys are so effective at torture, not just because their methods are better, but because their opponents are lesser, little weak men who will spill the second a boot is put to their throats. It's another way Call of Duty justifies the torture done by its protagonists. If the people they were torturing weren't ontologically evil, they wouldn't break so easily. But they are, and so they do. On the subject of torture techniques, my main takeaway is more simple. It all happens really fast, doesn't it? Out of 46 torture scenes, only a handful appear to take more than an hour. Usually, the good guys get information out in minutes. I won't tell you anything. 2 punches. Okay, here's everything I know. The games repeat this trope so relentlessly that they build their own version of common sense. Obviously, this works because we've seen it work so many times. If it doesn't work, it must be because the person being interrogated is particularly strong. So here's my question. Does it work? No. Seriously. Does it? I ask because I don't know of any information, any data on this kind of accelerated on-the-battlefield questioning. I mean, God, I don't even know. Do you know how much data on torture is redacted, classified, or completely unavailable? Do you know how many governments are completely unwilling to talk about the details of how they tortured, let alone if it resulted in anything? I mean, there's gotta be something here. I might just have to go back a little. Okay. Actually, yeah, here we go. This is really good documentation. It's from the 15th century. It's the Spanish Inquisition. I'm not going to say the line. It may seem somewhat absurd to compare these video games about conflicts in the 20th and 21st centuries to the documented torture of the late 1400s. But, as spelled out in the book Anatomy of Torture, the Inquisition represents perhaps the best, and maybe only, example of hundreds of instances of torture being systematically cataloged and assessed for their efficacy. Moreover, the Inquisition wasn't just good at documentation, it created the torturer's dream.
The Inquisition's target population was confined within the realms of an authoritarian state in which the Inquisition wielded absolute power and could draw on near unlimited resources. The most important of these resources was time. The Inquisition suffered none of the pressures of a combat setting or an anti-terrorism campaign. It could afford to spend decades and centuries perfecting its methods, and it could afford to dedicate years to gathering evidence against its prisoners.
In other words, this is the ideal scenario for effective torture. Unlimited time, unlimited money, unlimited political control, and zero reason to put ethics above effective methods. And what were the results of this slam dunk torture campaign? Information that was slow, fragmented, and absolutely needed to be corroborated. Anatomy of Torture does not claim that torture never works. In fact, it's rare among academic literature for focusing on documented cases of torture that were effective. And yet even then, even in the motherfucking Spanish Inquisition, torture never functioned as a quick and easy way to get hidden information.
Even the Inquisition, in an extraordinary setting in which it was able to perfect a vast torture machinery, was able, at best, to extract nuggets of corroborative information from torture victims. Often, that information was false, misleading, or incomplete.
As the pressure to swiftly get actionable intel increases, torture's efficacy plummets. Virtually all literature on interrogations concludes that lengthy engagements are far more effective at getting quality intelligence from a prisoner, whether through rapport building or torture techniques. In other words, the high-pressure situations of Call of Duty present a worst-case scenario for interrogation, immensely vulnerable to resistant subjects and/or false information. Anatomy of Torture couldn't be more blunt with this.
Torture is least effective where torture proponents advocate its use most enthusiastically, when responses to urgent crises call for novel and comprehensive information. No torture has, or will ever, defuse a ticking bomb.
This has played out too in the most high-profile cases of torture in recent history, the US's sweeping torture campaign as part of its war on terror. At once frenzied and inexorable, CIA torture techniques in the years and decades following 9/11 provided mountains of confessions and intel so comprehensively compromised by torture that the truth may never be untangled. The 6,000-page torture report delivered by the Senate in 2012 concluded that CIA torture was not an effective means of acquiring intelligence, impeded the national security missions of other government agencies, and justified its torture with inaccurate claims of its effectiveness while never adequately evaluating its actual effectiveness. In many specific instances, FBI interrogators claimed that their non-coercive means were completely undercut by CIA torture, which caused countless prisoners to clam up or produce false information. That is, if they didn't receive literal brain damage from the torture itself, a well-documented psychological process in which trauma causes significant memory loss and false recollections. Shortly after 9/11, Ibn al-Sheikh al-Libi provided information under torture that suggested Iraq possessed WMDs. This was, if it needs to be said, false information, nevertheless gleefully leveraged by the US government to justify their ensuing invasion. CIA handlers with first-hand knowledge of al-Libi's torture dispute the idea that he was intentionally lying. They say he just wanted to please his captors. In the book Torture and Democracy, a book so massive Price could use it to bludgeon an enemy captive, Darius Rejali systematically dismantles the idea that torture has ever been a reliable way to save lives in modern conflicts. The book's main claim, though, is that it has been democracies, not dictatorships or autocracies, that have pioneered the dominant methods of torture throughout the 20th and 21st centuries. These democracies have mainstreamed countless methods of quote-unquote clean torture, named as such because they don't cause physical scarring. Electrocution, for example, waterboarding, forced standing or kneeling, sweat boxes, sleep deprivation, deafening noises. These clean torture methods allow so-called civilized democracies to constantly subvert human rights while keeping up the veneer, the shield, of morality. And what's interesting to me is how often Call of Duty does not use these methods. There are some clean tortures, threatening the Butcher's family, for example. In the first Modern Warfare 2, Soap and Ghost electro-torture a guy, which may be quote-unquote clean, though in the remake it was changed to a blowtorch for some reason. But far more often, the torture itself is undeniably dirty, the brutality made part of the point. When the bad guys do this, it's because they're sadists who enjoy watching people suffer. But when the good guys do it, they're given a different role. They become a sin eater, a self-appointed martyr who will take on the necessary immorality of the world in order to preserve everyone else. This is Price's iconic line in the new Modern Warfare: "We get dirty and the world stays clean." Because the series is so relentless in its deployment of torture, so consistently gives its protagonists the superhuman ability to beat accurate information out of an enemy in minutes, it constructs a world where these sin eaters are absolutely necessary to the continued functioning of our world. But gradually, time after time, game after game, we forget that they're taking on sins at all. Remember, the ticking time bomb hypothetical is written to be so extreme because it assumes that we'd all prefer not to torture. But at this point, 20 games and 46 torture scenes in, Call of Duty barely bothers to even set up the stakes of its time bombs anymore. In Call of Duty Cold War, Mason and Adler catch Qasim, a terrorist somehow related to the Iranian hostage crisis. Adler throws his buddy off a roof, Mason threatens to do the same, and Qasim talks, giving you the information of another terrorist named Kadivar. But Kadivar has nothing to do with the hostage crisis, nor do the protagonists even try to learn anything about it. He's just another in the endless sequence of guys to kill that lead to other guys to kill. If there is some notion of a time bomb here, it's abstracted to the point of meaninglessness. In 1964, the seminal philosopher Hannah Arendt wrote, "Those who choose the lesser evil forget very quickly that they chose evil." Has Call of Duty ever grappled with the fact that its heroes again and again choose evil? I don't think it has. The only times it villainizes characters for their torture is when the predetermined morality of those characters already swings villainous. And so, even though the games might delight in the squeamishness their torture scenes prompt in players, torture itself is ultimately framed as a morally neutral act. It's something good guys and bad guys do in equal measure, the good guys simply better at it because their opponents are inherently lesser. Call of Duty, it must be said, is effectively a fantasy series. Despite its aspirations of legitimacy, despite its use of real guns in real countries, there's little in the campaigns of any of these games that resembles real-life military combat. The temptation, therefore, is to just shrug off the whole thing. So there are 46 torture scenes in the Call of Duty games. You also shoot about 1 billion people, get your arm ripped off by a robot, and kick a guy in zero gravity. Who cares? Me! I care, and not just because for months my dreams have been filled with infinite spreadsheets of beatings and waterboardings and electrocutions. Let me tell you about one thing that Call of Duty nails in its depiction of torture, a phenomenon Darius Rejali refers to as de-skilling.
Why do fingerprinting when you've got a bat? It is simply easier to turn to torture than to do the hard, time-consuming work of surveillance, interviewing, verification, and intelligence analysis.
He cites cases in India and Japan, in the US, of agencies noticing that as reliance on torture grows, everything else falls by the wayside. It precludes the development of other investigative skills. Far from a last resort, the more regularly torture is used, the more its use becomes common sense, until it cements itself as first, best, and in Call of Duty's case, seemingly only strategy to gaining information. Torture, Rejali writes, is a shortcut that soon becomes a well-traveled road. There's a sort of sadistic laziness that echoes throughout the 46 instances of torture in Call of Duty, reverberating out of its individual campaigns to encompass the franchise as a whole. Yes, the heroes of the game live in a fantasy land where pubescent ideas of torture are immediately effective at getting a villainous captive to spill everything they know. They live in this fantasy land, Because that is where Call of Duty's writers have chosen to place them, year after year, war after war. Time and again, we see characters brutalize their enemies in a way that sniffs at moral grayness, before reconfirming there's no need for true critical thought. The good guys stay good and the bad guys stay bad.
You know, the worst thing that you can imagine is when your rights are being violated and when you are tortured and abused and brutalized by someone who's regarded as someone who respects human rights, as someone who doesn't believe in torture. So when you are tortured by someone who doesn't believe in torture, it's really, really scary. Because you're shocked. How can this guy who believes in human rights doing this to me?
In reality, there are people who are paid to torture, but even among them, there exists no torture expert who can instantly tell truth from lie or know just the amount of pain to exert. That the Call of Duty franchise so endlessly reproduces this trope through cruelty or laziness or some mix of the two speaks to its staggering lack of imagination. The games are only able to imagine heroes whose superficial complexity stems from their eagerness to do violence to those they hold captive. It is the same lack of imagination that leads countries with a purported value in human rights to turn to torture again and again, despite its consistently documented failure to result in anything except broken men and useless information. 4 years ago, a user posted an unusual topic on Call of Duty's r/Modern Warfare subreddit, a community of, at the time, nearly 1 million people. "I need help with skipping torture scenes in the campaign," they wrote, a topic that immediately prompted a discussion of what people should be sensitive about and why. But over the months I've been working on this essay, I just keep thinking about this one comment, sneering at the idea of a Call of Duty without torture scenes. The entire point of Modern Warfare's campaign is to be a more realistic depiction of war, with moments that are meant to make you uncomfortable. Getting rid of that from Modern Warfare's campaign would be like removing Jesus from the Bible. Call of Duty has so thoroughly interwoven its own legacy with the philosophy and aesthetics of torture that it may just be too late to turn back. Is the franchise even capable of giving us a hero who opposed torture now? Or would the acknowledgement that there is a choice in these matters retroactively cast Price, Soap, Mason, and so many others as monsters? Men who didn't simply pick the lesser of two evils, but actively chose to consistently violate human rights as a matter of principle. Torture is in the series' DNA now. It's the bedrock on which the games have staked decades of claims about war and humanity. They get dirty, and gradually we forget that we ever valued being clean. Look, man, usually I like to do the thing where I'm like, there's so much more on this topic I haven't talked about. Go check out this exclusive video on Nebula, this amazing streaming service I'm a part of. I've got a ton of videos in that category. But I'm so tired of talking about torture. I'm tired of reading about it and tired of making my loved ones listen to me talk about it. So you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna pick blackberries and make a pie. In my previous Nebula cooking videos, there's been some tangential connection. Wanted Dead's lasagna recipe, impressionist paintings of baked goods. Here, now, it's blackberry season, and I wanted to do something fun. So come into my kitchen in this Nebula exclusive video to hang out and talk about pies and video games and all sorts of things that aren't torture. The color and the smell really imply that they are right. Many times I've come up to you and been like, guess what I'm doing? And you're like, what? And I'm like, I've started playing a new Metal Gear Solid game.
It's true. Y'all, this pie could be a total disaster.
You can, of course, join Nebula and enjoy this cooking video and many, many other exclusives of mine by going to nebula.tv/Jacob Geller, where you'll get a full 40% off an annual subscription, a whole year for only $30. You probably already knew that. But I have something new to tell you too. Nebula does gift cards now. And yeah, every other gift card might be a boring gift, but hear me out. I just know you have people in your life that you want to talk about Nebula stuff with, but they've stubbornly refused to sign up. Well, now they have no excuse. Hello, my dear friend. I just got you the gift of watching Jacob Geller make a blackberry pie. That's what you can say to them as you present them with a year of Nebula via gift card. You get my discount on that as well, only $30 for the whole year. And then they can check out, I don't know, Jesse Gender's upcoming movie, or The Getaway, the new Nebula exclusive show by the Jetlag team, or just my crazy backlog of Nebula exclusive videos. Honestly, I have no idea how long this video will last on YouTube. Making an essay on torture scenes is an absurd thing to do when my job is partially reliant on currying favor with advertisers and algorithms. Fortunately, Nebula means I don't have to limit my topics to appease those things. By signing up, you are directly helping me make more videos like this one. So, get yourself a subscription or get a gift card for someone else in your life. Either way, the best way to do that is to get a big old discount by following the link in the description.